everybody, and welcome to The View from the Top. We are live. Who have we got in the house? We've got Radhika coming in. We've got people coming in from all over the world. We've got an amazing show for you today. We are going to be talking about spinning. And I'm not talking about spinning a tale, spinning a yarn. I'm not even talking about a bicycle class in the gym. We're talking about spinning out. We're talking about demergers. I see Steve Hoffman's come in from Beantown. Good to see you, Steve. We've got Emily from France. We've got Anna Helena from Porto. We've got people coming in from all over the world, and many thanks to especially those of you in the US who are coming in. I know you've got Thanksgiving tomorrow, so happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and we hope you have a really great celebration tomorrow. So as I said, you know how it works, everybody. Please join in the conversation, write in the comments box, tell us who you are, where you are, what's new. Let's bring the love together. Let's bring this community together that we all like so much. So today's show is all about spinning. More on that in a moment. Next week, we've got a really interesting show too. People know, I think, that we have a Changemakers initiative where we have people from all over the world who share a passion for technology, talking about their passion for technology, helping each other, and indeed helping design technology. We've got not one, not two, but three changemakers on the show next week. We've got David Carmichael from CGI, we've got Krista Caldwell from Conresnick, and we've got Karen Hale from Unity Technology, and they're all going to be talking about their passion for technology, their passion for charity, and what we're doing with advisors to create a new mobility world for the future. It's going to be a great show. And if you're interested in being a change maker, well, more on that later, but we'll be talking a bit about that because we're going on a major expansion drive to get more change makers to join us. So people coming in from all over the world, that's great. Now, I know people join the show for lots and lots of different reasons. One of the reasons sometimes is that people want their codes. They want their codes to get their CPE credits, and here they are. So if you want codes for example, ERC, you want your GMS or your CRP code, there it is. If you need a CPE code for HRCI or for SHRM, there it is. Many thanks to all our friends at ERC for giving us the ERC CPE codes, and also to our good friends at Rocket Mortgage for giving us the codes for HRCI or SHRM. So if you want those codes, then all you have to do is screenshot this page, or maybe just take a photo of this page, or get your pen and paper out and write it down. I'll leave that up there just for another couple of minutes. The other thing that we do every week is we try and share some breaking news, what's been going on around the world. And this week we're doing that as ever. We're going to be sharing the breaking news, but we're introducing a new feature, which I hope you like, and we're going to carry on with going forward, is if we hear of a job that's out there for a global mobility manager or in our industry, we're also going to be highlighting job opportunities. We appreciate there have been layoffs in our industry. So as our service to the industry, whenever we hear of a job opportunity, we're going to be putting it up on the screen. So if you're looking for a job, or if you're just curious, or indeed if you've got a job that you want to post, let us know and we'll see if we can put it up on screen. Anyway, here we go. Here's the breaking news for the last 7 days. there we are. That's our news for the week. Congratulations to everyone who's been promoted. Everyone's been got new jobs. Big shout out to my new colleagues at who've joined Benevo. So shout out to you guys too. Shout out to Ursula Leparoli down in Sydney in Australia, who won the champion award at the Temmie Awards, and she's asked me to point out that she has a global mobility newsletter which you can subscribe to on her LinkedIn channel. So if you're interested in that, then do reach out to Ursula. And also lots of interesting jobs out there as well. So a lot going on in our industry in the last few days. What we're going to do now is we're going to go on to our regular immigration update. And as ever, I'm delighted to say that we have with us the one and only Julia Onslow-Cole. So you know how it works, everybody. Please hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button as we welcome Julia on. And I have to tell you, and this is me just sort of fishing for more hearts and likes and love from you guys, is that Julia has actually got off her sick bed to be with us today. So she deserves a really, really big thank you for being with us today. So let's bring Julia Onslow-Cole onto stage.
Hi, Brian. I think that's too much information for everyone.
No, I'm so sorry to hear that you've got a bit of flu, and that anyway, so grateful that you've made the effort to be with us. And I know, I'm just looking at all these hearts coming up the screen. People really appreciate what you do for us week in, week out. So today, Julia, let's get into it. You're going to be talking about the US, I believe.
Yes. So, well, first of all, I just wanted to give a big shout out to my colleague, Raquel Lieberman. She's a partner who works in New York, and I work very closely with her. And I thought it might be good to spend a couple of minutes to say what's the impact of the US midterm elections. Because on the 8th of November, we had more or less all the results. I think we're still waiting for one. And I'm sorry if you're from the US, but I thought I would just deal with this from a non-US perspective. But there's two chambers in the US. So the Senate, and then there's the lower chamber, the House. So in the House, there's 435 seats, and they're re-elected every 2 years, all 435 seats. And in the upper chamber, the Senate, there's 100 seats, but people sit in those seats for 6 years. So at every election, about a third of those seats become vacant. And it's really important because this is the whole legislative branch of the US, and it has a huge impact on the president's ability to pass immigration legislation. Well, any legislation, but obviously immigration legislation. So going into the elections, the midterms, the Democratic Party controlled both chambers, but by a very narrow majority. And we have discussed this on several occasions.
Absolutely.
That because it was so narrow, it was very difficult for Congress to agree on some passage of critical bills. And in fact, we did get really far because the House passed last year a bill to offer citizenship for dreamers and farm workers bills, and they were really, really good, but they all died in the Senate. And many of the legislative requirements are that you have to have a 2/3 majority. And because there's such a bifurcation of views between the Republicans and the Democrats, things really don't move on. If you look at immigration, the Republicans are very focused on border security, and often look at things such as undocumented crossings, loss of US jobs. On the Democrats, they are looking obviously to support dreamers, but they were also, there's a lot of good things that they're looking at in terms of increasing talent in the US. So the result of the midterm election was, unfortunately for the Democrats, that they lost control of the House. They retained a majority in the Senate, and the strength of that majority is not yet known, because there's one runoff in the state of Georgia, which is slated for January. But really what this means is that we're unlikely to see any legislative reform for the next 2 years.
So
now
effectively we've got stalemate.
Yes, effectively we've got stalemate. But I did do a Benevo program a few months ago, and I'm going to do another one in the new year, on how clever some of the policies have been to actually attach bits of immigration to other acts which don't seem naturally to be an immigration bill, but they've actually attached on some really good immigration pieces to other legislation. So they're, by sort of amending policy, doing that, there is some inching forward on immigration, but there's going to be no really big legislative changes. And then the final thing I just wanted to say is that at the very current time, if you said what's the number one hurdle to getting into the US, it's the limited appointments that are available at US consulates. And this is really bad. We had seen a little bit of improvement in some jurisdictions, but it's particularly bad at the moment, and obviously very bad going into the holidays. So the strong piece of advice is, if that you have anyone that needs a visa and need to get them an appointment, try not to make any travel plans for them until you have that appointment, and until ideally they have the visa. And you know, it's really, really important that you apply as soon as possible.
Okay. So, Julia, thank you so much for that. I mean, that's been, you know, a fabulous update, and I appreciate that, you know, you're fighting a bug at the same time. So, you know, absolutely delighted that you could be with us. So, everybody, we're going to move on to talk about tax now. But as we bring Pat on and we say goodbye to Julia, please, everybody, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's move on from immigration to tax. Welcome show. And I know on a day like today, we've got to talk football, and I mean real football, not, you know, like soccer football, you know, not that sort of American version. So anyway, so it's the World Cup is on, and Pat, you said to me, you're going to talk about the tax implications of the World Cup. So what about that then? So
I know. It was quite a fascinating topic to research, but I thought it'd be very topical since the World Cup just started this past weekend. And, you know, many commentators have talked about the political controversies, both with Qatar itself as the host country, and as well as FIFA, the organizing organization. But it's extremely popular and will make a ton of money. According to Bloomberg, they're expecting to generate over $5 billion in revenue from this World Cup. Wow. And most of it goes to FIFA, to be honest. They're responsible for paying out the prize money. So they're paying out to the winning national teams. Every team that actually participates gets some of the payout. About $440 million of that $5 billion will be paid out in prize money. The winning team, whoever that may be, will receive $47 million in prize money, and every team, even the ones at the lower tiers, will get $9 million in prize money.
And when you say the team gets it, you mean their national association?
Yes, exactly, right. And of course, FIFA also pays offsetting costs to the premier clubs that are sending these players. So most of these players are already employed by the clubs, And those clubs do get offsetting payments from FIFA to compensate for the fact that they're not working and playing a normal season at this point in time. So what are the tax implications? Well, FIFA is a nonprofit association organized in Switzerland. And generally speaking, they will not pay any taxes on the revenues in Switzerland. And one of the unique things about FIFA is that when they negotiate with the host countries to host the games, part of the requirement is that they become exempt from tax. Not only FIFA, but any third party that's associated with the games, broadcasters, the various organizations that help support organizing that. And that may include the players themselves. So likely that players will not be responsible for tax in the host location. Of course, in Qatar, there isn't an income tax for individuals, generally speaking. But, we know that.
So next time round, the World Cup is in North America.
That's right.
US in particular famously taxes people all over the world.
I know. I'm very curious as to how they're going to handle that.
There'll be a deal done then, or presumably a deal has been done between FIFA and
yes,
the US and
I think so. I don't know this for certain, but I think that they have some arrangement. Either they'll indemnify and have the sponsoring organizations pick up the tax tab or not. But, here's all this money being generated from this World Cup, and very little tax is being paid. So I found that extremely fascinating to look at.
Okay, and I know you also wanted to touch upon the fact that there'd been what is effectively a budget called an autumn statement in the UK.
Yes,
so and update on that. Yeah.
Well, that came out a week ago, and they have a new chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. He's going in the opposite direction as his predecessor. So he's actually proposing tax increases kind of across the board. Corporate taxes rates are going up. And of interest to individuals and to global mobility managers, the 45% top rate for individuals is retained. And the threshold upon which that is applied has been lowered. So about maybe £24,000 is now subject to an extra 5%. So for higher incomes, that means maybe $1,200, $1,300 of additional taxes being paid. And the other thing that was announced in it is that everything else is pretty much frozen. So they won't be indexing for inflation, the personal allowance, the brackets, the thresholds for national insurance, all that's being frozen until 2028. So we will definitely have over the period of time what I've called before bracket creep. So people are being paid more to compensate for inflation costs and whatnot, potentially being pushed into a higher tax bracket. That's going to be part of the UK tax scheme for a number of years now. So
absolutely, and one of the things we were half expecting was some form of attack on non-domicile status, and nothing happened on
nothing.
That.
Nothing happened with that.
Nothing was the news. So Pat, many thanks for being with us again today. We're now going to bring Tally on to give us an update. So everybody, you know how it works. Say goodbye to Pat, say hello to Tally by hitting the like button, the heart button, the applause button, and let's share some of that love. So goodbye, Pat, and hello to Tally.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Brian. Hi, everyone.
So what are you going to tell us today, Tally?
So actually, you already touched that next week, we're going to have our change makers. We're going to have a show that will be centered around our change makers. And so I wanted to use this opportunity to actually call our friends in the audience. I already saw Nicola, who's a change maker. Sunn Sunn is now a change maker also, your guest. And if there's anyone in the audience that would like to become a change maker, please approach us. And I'll post a link to the Changemakers page, and you can always approach me too. So just make sure that you're an in-house corporate professional, that you are passionate about technology and want to lead a change in the global mobility sphere. And that you want to promote your charity of choice, because we are donating on behalf of our changemakers for their charities of choice. So if you think you qualify, do approach us. And for our changemakers that are now in the audience, I saw Begonia also. So she's also with us here. And for our changemakers that are watching us, do join our next discussion next week. And it's going to be about cost savings in global mobility. So what can we do as global mobility to contribute to that? So looking forward to that discussion. It's going to be interesting.
I think cost savings is such a huge issue, and I suspect that'll become
especially now.
Now, absolutely. So, Tali, we're going to move on to our main discussion. So I'll say goodbye to you, Tali. We've got joining us today. We're going to be talking about a company called Nouryon and their spin out from AkzoNobel. And I'm absolutely delighted. We've got with us backstage, just going to come up and join us now on stage. We've got Sunn Sunn from Nouryon and Cyril Brenninkmeijer from ECA International. So everybody, you know how it works. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button, and let's move on to the subject of the day, which is spinning. Welcome to the show, Sunn Sunn and Cyril. So let's start off. Whereabouts in the world are you guys today? Sunn Sunn, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Okay, and now didn't sound like a Texan accent to me. So where are you from originally?
It's a long story, Cyril and Brian. I was born in India, but I've lived in Singapore, in New Zealand, in London, and also Australia before moving to the US.
Okay, so I've got to ask you, who are you supporting for the World Cup then with that? So you've got India, they're not through, but you've got Australia, they're through. The US is in the finals.
Yeah, I'm actually supporting Argentina. Okay. So I'm with them with their recent loss.
Okay, well, I know we had somebody, I think it was Menas from Saudi in the audience today, who was celebrating that famous win. I love all this. This is really bringing our community together. Okay, so yeah. Sunn Sunn, welcome to the show. And Cyril, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, I'm currently in London, UK. I have an equally complex background. I'm a Dutch national, but I was born in Paris. I was raised in Brussels, Belgium, and I went to school here in the UK and have lived my life here in the UK ever since, except for 2 years in Germany. So there we are.
Well, you've got a wide selection of teams that you could go for, but
correct.
You're orange, are you?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Okay. Wouldn't look any other way.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into the subject. So, Sunn Sunn, tell us a bit about Nouryon, because it's a company that people may not know that well, but equally, it's got a 400-year history. So, tell us a bit about Nouryon, its history, and indeed what it does.
Sure. So Nouryon is actually spun out from AkzoNobel. Most of you may be aware of AkzoNobel. They're a very large manufacturing chemical company. And so we're being spun out of AkzoNobel back in 2018. And this was before I joined the company. I joined Nouryon about 18 months ago now. And so Nouryon, we are a specialty chemicals manufacturer. So the way I like to describe it is if you look at the back of a shampoo bottle and you look at all the weird ingredients on the back of it, Nouryon actually produces those chemicals that would go into the ingredients for shampoo.
Okay,
so the chances are
names, nobody knows what they are. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So chances are, some of you may have used a Nouryon product without even realizing. We're actually a $5 billion company. We're owned by private equity, and we have locations in over 80 countries and 7,000 employees worldwide.
Wow. Okay, so presumably most major brands will be using your products as part of their supply chain.
Exactly correct. Yeah, so we're in a number of industries, mostly and I can give you some of those. I don't know off the top of my head, but we're in agriculture and food, home and personal care, paints and coatings, polymer specialties, natural resources, and renewable fibers. And just wanted to mention that we're a very sustainable company. We've just rated platinum for the Ecovitas rating.
Okay, wow, that's very impressive. Okay, and tell us a bit about your program. We'll go into the detail more, but roughly speaking, how many people would you move a year?
So I would describe our program as more of a boutique program. I've worked at larger companies in the past, at Bechtel and HPE, where we had thousands of expats and cross-border moves. Here at Nouryon, we're a lot smaller.
We've had your HPE colleague on the show a couple of times.
Yes, correct. Yeah, and I worked with Kerwin in my previous role in the mobility team. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with Kerwin. So in our program, so I would say maximum 100 moves a year. And most of them are actually in international transfers, what we call international local hire moves. And a small percentage of them are in expat assignments, your traditional expat assignment. And they're really more for our more senior people and project-based workers.
Okay, and I know, Cyril, that your relationship with Nouryon and it's indeed the predecessor, AkzoNobel, goes back many, many years. Because I mean, ECA, I'm not sure everybody knows this, but ECA's got a very unique structure where you've got lots of shareholders who effectively founded you, who are major corporates. So maybe tell us a bit about that and your relationship to Nouryon and the history there.
Yeah, no problem. So ECA was set up in the 70s by a group of companies, of which Akzo was one. And they were thereby and still are our client and have been ever since. And we've been purchasing our data and have had our EC Enterprise system for a number of years now. And naturally, as Nouryon then spun off from AkzoNobel, the relationship continued. So as far as I was concerned, as an account manager for AkzoNobel, I then became also account manager for Nouryon. And, my relationship continued.
So you had to split yourself in half then. You had one
plant
and you had two. It was like, I know this is quite pertinent to you. In a way, it's a bit like living with a newborn, was it? You had this company, and then you had this other baby company coming off it. And congratulations! I believe you've got a 3-month-old.
Thank you very much. Nicely woven in that one there, Brian. Yes, I do. I do, which has made our lives very interesting. Anyone in the audience who's got children will know what it's like to balance work and life with a new baby. But yeah, obviously we're super thrilled.
Okay, well, let's talk on a little bit about living with a newborn. But the newborn in this case, of course, is the company that's being spun out. So Nouryon, from your perspective, there you were. In many ways, it's everybody's dream. Let's rip everything up and start again, and we can do things as we want. Is that how it felt? I appreciate you weren't there right at the beginning, but is that how it felt? Was it quite the opposite? Was it a nightmare that we've got to reinvent everything and all of a sudden we don't have the comforts of the mothership?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I'll hedge my answer. So coming in, I was told, we're sort of a startup. We have a startup mentality. We're developing a lot of our processes and procedures and policies. We really need somebody who has that background and experience to take this project on. and take it in a direction where this company is going. So I spent, I would say, the first 6 to 8 months observing, watching, learning about the business, talking to the managers and the hiring managers, business partners, to try and really understand what it is that the business needed. Looking at the policies, procedures, I did notice that there was some bit of work to do. As you mentioned, we'd just been born out of this big mothership, and question is, were those current policies and procedures fit for purpose for a company like Nouryon? And so I've spent, I'd say the first part of my life at Nouryon reflecting on that, and then the next part planning on ways we can move the needle to make it more fit for purpose.
Okay, so I'll ask the audience a question in the audience, because I mean, in a way, Nouryon had this sort of magic wand, that moment that they could actually turn around and say, you know what, we don't have to do what we did before. We can do something completely different. And the question I'd like to ask you in the audience now, if you're a corporate, answer it from your own perspective. If you're a supplier, answer it. Put yourselves in the shoe of one of your typical corporates. And ask yourself the question. The question is this, is if you did have that fabled magic wand, what aspects of your mobility program would you change? And the choices that I'll give you are these. You can change your policies, you can implement better technology, you can change your vendors, or indeed you don't need to change anything because it's all perfect. So out there in the audience, if you could change your program, what would your first focus be on? Would it be on changing the policy? Would it be on implementing better technology? Would it be on changing the vendors? Or actually, is there absolutely nothing to change? So give us your answers and let us know what you think. But Cyril, from your point of view, you were there at the time that Nouryon was being spun out, and so you've looked at it, and I suspect you've had other clients where similar things have happened. What would you change, just generically, rather than talking about specifically Nouryon? If there was a magic wand, where would your focus be initially?
Do you mean as a vendor or
as someone advising a vendor, as someone advising a corporate, going in, as an expert?
That's a tough one, but I suppose I think what you would first do before starting to change anything is maybe not change anything for the time being and let the dust settle and see what's what. A little bit like when you move into a new house, rather than ripping everything out, just live in it for a year or for 6 months or for however long you see fit. See what's working, see what isn't working, and if what isn't working is policies, then focus on that. If suddenly the policies actually can wait, or they're all right, or they're not quite fit for purpose, but they'll do for now, and you could do with some technology, then go for that. So I think that would be my advice, is to not go crazy and all guns blazing on day one, but actually kind of settle down and see how things are going for the first however many months.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I take your point, and let's just go back to that. So you would say, and I think that's exactly what you guys did, Sunn Sunn, is the first thing to do is do nothing, and just take a view and look. And tell us about the go nothing phase. I mean, how long would that last? And because obviously, well, actually, can you do nothing, or there's some things you have to change immediately?
Well, in mobility, there's no such thing as doing nothing. There's a lot to do on a day-to-day basis. We're still running a ship, making sure everything's sailing on time. Using that metaphor. And in the meantime, we're sort of planning ahead, thinking about what things could or could not change, and observing. What I did notice is that our programs were really focused on assignments and not on the transfers. When our company was actually doing a lot more transfers than assignments. So it seemed very peculiar to me that we had no documented transfer policy, just a sort of a very core flex sort of approach, which wasn't really documented. And we had 4 documented assignments when assignments were a significant fraction of what we were doing. Also, the business is, in a kind of is very concerned about cost and being cost effective. Assignments are expensive. And what we were noticing is that for projects, a lot of the assignment policies were being amended to suit what the projects needed, while still meeting the employee needs. So I noticed there was a real gap there, not being able to just use a standard policy for projects, but having to continuously reinvent the wheel with every move. So that's not ideal. So, seeing some of those things and then noticing a pattern after about 12 months made me think, okay, put pen to paper, exactly what you're saying. If I could change things now, what would I change? And I think some of those options are all very relevant to me. So looking at policies, how can I update our policies? How can we use what we have without reinventing the wheel, and perhaps coming up with some new policies that would suit us better? How is technology assisting us? At AkzoNobel, we had an army of people, I believe, that were in mobility, whereas at Nouryon, we're a much smaller team. So how can we harness technology and our vendors to do more, and for us to do more of a governance type role? Third, our vendors. Our vendors are great. They've been with us for a number of years, but we haven't done an RFP. So that was another thing to consider. So I would say it's all of the above, but you just have to kind of figure out what is the low-hanging fruit. What can you tackle first? And then work your way slowly through that list. So in some ways, it's been a dream. It's great to come in and put your stamp on things rather than having to just sort of do what your predecessors have set up.
And let me say a little bit about what the poll said, and then we'll take some of the audience comments. The question was, if you had a magic wand, what would you change first? And in terms of what the poll said, it was this, is that 29% said that they would change their policies. A whopping great 65% said that they would change technology. And then only about 3% said that they would change their vendors. And another 3% actually said we don't need to change anything. So it was, as I said, 29% said policy, and nearly 2/3 said we'd look at the technology. Let's look at some of the comments that have come up. Maybe we could just pull some of those comments on screen. I'll just get some of those comments up there now, if I may. So here, the show is stopping from the beginning. I'm sorry about that. I think that's happening more on laptops than it is on iPads and phones for some reason. So here are the comments from Nicola. Secure more funds for global mobility in order to automate processes. No money, no technology. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing there probably wasn't a lot of money being thrown around at the beginning. I suspect actually owners, if anything, it was more like money's a bit, tight at the moment. But Anna Helena has said change policies and procedures. And I think we had another from David Welch. Here we go. The focus should be aligning the new culture and make adjustments to the policy as needed, then build the tech into the next stage for new operational stability. I see you nodding, Sunn Sunn. Does that sort of ring true?
Yes, very much so. So we're really starting at, what should our policies look like to start? And then looking at where and how we want to implement. And that's one of the projects been working with ECA on, is how do our cost estimates need to reflect our new policies? Do we need to build in new new templates in our cost estimating tool to reflect project policies, extended business travelers, which are really being used more than a traditional assignment package? And then looking at our vendors, how can they using their technology to, rather than like bringing in new technology, look at our existing vendors and saying, well, what technology do we not currently use? It's surprising that there were certain features that we weren't using currently that we had access to. What can we do to automate, streamline, and kind of move more of that out to our vendors rather than internally to our team? So I think that's all part of the path that you would go down. Absolutely. You can be thinking about technology before you know what your policies are.
So tell me about it from your point of view as a vendor, as a supplier, a long-standing supplier to AkzoNobel, Cyril, because you had a platform that was supporting them, and then you had to presumably in some way split that platform so that some of it could go on with Nouryon, tell us a bit about that process, because presumably that had to happen before the legal split happened.
Yes, correct. So AkzoNobel have our assignment management system, EC Enterprise, and during the process of Nouryon spinning off, there came a point where already within the system there were two companies using one system. So we had to kind of create a logical split, as we called it, where certain rights were given. So that the AkzoNobel global mobility team could only access and see the AkzoNobel population that was in the system, and similarly with Nouryon. So all of that had to be done behind the scenes, and then afterwards came the whole process of actually literally splitting. But before that, we get into the legal and to the contracts and to the IT security, and all once everything is all the I's are dotted and T's are struck, then there's the physical split. So one system becomes two. Again, a lot of stuff has to happen behind the scenes. Our job also was to make it as seamless as possible as far as the client is concerned, and so that from one day to the next, they shouldn't really feel anything. There shouldn't really be any bumps on the road as far as they are concerned. As far as Akzo or Nouryon are concerned, all of the building work and the development work and the software work is done by us. But for them, it should be a nice, smooth road. And I'd like to think that we achieved that. And then suddenly Nouryon had its own system, which was actually kind of a carbon copy of the AkzoNobel one, because that was, that's what they wished. But then obviously they were left with a legacy, a very AkzoNobel heavy system, where a lot of the terminology was still, a lot of the policies were still AkzoNobel driven and focused. And then came the projects that Sunn Sunn's predecessor had to do to sort of slowly wean away from that and Nouryonize, which is now a word, the system, and make it more their own, as it were.
And how long did this process take, or is it still ongoing? We're on the journey together, right? So it's ongoing, because Nouryon has been evolving ever since, as any startup, as you call yourselves, Sunn Sunn would. And they've been changing their policies, tweaking from the small bits and pieces to slightly larger projects of implementing new policies. And Nouryon is growing in that sense, and we are adapting the assignment management software system for them. Along with that, we are evolving together with them. It's a partnership, and it's ongoing, and it probably always will be ongoing, because no company stands still.
I think Cyril, just add, it's basic as updating our data sets. A lot of our data sets go back to the AkzoNobel time, retiring the old legacy policies that are in the system. Maybe embedding more data that we would use from ECA, because our team is smaller now, so we don't have the capacity to update various data pieces in the tool. So it's all those things to see what should the tool look like now with Nouryon versus AkzoNobel.
Okay, because I think one of the points you made when we were talking earlier is you said that on reflection, having done that period of review, you concluded that some of your legacy policies were not fit for purpose for Nouryon. So tell us a bit about that, so the policies that didn't feel right in the new environment, and the process to changing them, and what you've been doing there.
Sure. So our policies were, again, focused more on the assignment policies, and we're not doing as many assignments now. The traditional assignment, as we all know, is on the down. Companies are looking to do more project-based assignments, business traveler type scenarios, more international transfers. So our current suite of policies is really like a home office type corporate senior executive move. Really fit for that, and not really everybody else. And so I've been looking at ways where we can have a project policy that addresses the needs of our project workers that are assigned to far-flung regions without having to tweak the short-term assignment policy
Tell us
that's
a
in
bit
place.
about that. I mean, what would a project be? Just give me an idea about project work.
Sure. I probably can't mention too much about the
Sure.
type of project or the name of it, but we do have projects in Uruguay and China, previously in Russia, Paraguay, where employees are parachuted in for periods of 6 to 8 months, where they are performing productive work, requiring work permits, where they are going to be needing some help from a assignment perspective, for example, short-term allowance, flights, accommodation, and so really providing a policy that meets that need, as opposed to all the bells and whistles associated with an expat package. So we're still going to keep those policies for those types of moves, but we need to branch out to some of these other policy types that are less expensive.
Okay, and from an ECA perspective, Cyril, is that something where you've been designing new policies for Nouryon? Is that how it's worked?
We're actually working with our current relocation vendor with our policies. Yeah.
Okay. So that's something that you work with the RMC on.
Yes.
And actually, talking about the RMC, I mean, you did mention earlier that one of the things in there was actually looking at all your suppliers and the contracts, because presumably when you split out, you took the contracts with you, and you had to look to see actually, that was then, this is now. So has there been a vendor selection process going on over the last couple of years, or is it?
Yes, it's been a process. So before I joined, we switched immigration providers. We're now looking at the relocation providers, the RMC. I firmly do believe RFPs are necessary to test the market and make sure knowing what's out there. So it seems like the right time to do it. Especially from a technology perspective, I think technology has changed a lot in the last 5-6 years, and so it's really important that we have an RMC that can offer the best technology that would suit our needs. And then the next piece will probably be the tax piece next year.
Okay. So, and how do you do that then? You're going through procurement. I mean, it's a standard thing.
Yeah, it's a standard process that we go through with procurement. Yeah.
So again, is that processes that you've taken with you from AkzoNobel, or have you looked at it from scratch and said, actually, this is what I think best practice is, and you've looked at maybe your own career in Bechtel or wherever you were, and so I'm going to use those learnings as well?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. It's taking, what's worked for AkzoNobel and looking at my current experience. I'll be very humble about it. I'm sure there are a lot smarter people out there that have better ideas. So I'm learning while talking to my peer groups, understanding, what it is that we're looking for, and kind of putting together a scope of services that will hopefully reflect what our current company needs.
Well, I know you're one of our change makers, and one of the change makers do occasionally is they pick each other's brains on processes and for these things. So do feel free to reach out. And if anybody would like to be a change maker, then again, do reach out to us. Another area you've talked about is immigration policy and changing your immigration policy. So tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so right now we have a U.S. green card policy. And literally it was taken from AkzoNobel. I think we just changed the logo. And so what I'm doing right now with our immigration providers is working out a global policy for immigration, as well as US specific. As you all are aware, in the US, it's a very complex, volatile environment, constantly changing, and employees need security. They need to understand what is the company position. And so often you get questions about when will I be sponsored, what types of fees are covered, and I want to make sure we give a consistent response. That's very important. So it's something that I've been working on with our immigration provider to pull together.
Okay, and what sort of time frame would that be?
I'm hoping we'll probably stand something up in the next 6 months. Yeah. But again, I'm relying very much on my peer groups to help me pull something together. I'm a part of multiple networks, so it's really great to get the input of my colleagues.
Okay, and Cyril, you're an advisor. You're a client account manager at ECA. What sort of advice would you be giving to companies going through this process
of demerging? As far as goodness me, where to start? The biggest learning point I got was actually to start the processes in time. It's actually quite baffling how slow transitioning from one provider can be to another, or even remaining with the same provider like happened to us, but still new contracts need to be set in place. And that is notoriously an incredibly slow process because you need to get the legal departments involved. Now, as far as we're concerned, we can work quite quickly because we only have so many clients that are splitting. But obviously at Nouryon, for example, Nouryon's legal department had to deal with all of the vendors' contracts and IT security. So they have a pile yay high to go through, of which ECA was one. And so starting whenever you think you need to start 6 months before that, because believe me, by the time you get to the deadline, and the deadline is when AkzoNobel says, we can't use the system we can't have Nouryon use our system anymore, so we're just going to cut you off. That deadline's there, and then you have no more system. So you really need to get everything in order by a particular deadline, and that process needs to start very, very early on, because otherwise you're going to get caught out, and getting caught out means basically having nothing left and having to resort back to Excel and back to basics. So if there's any takeaway from that, is really get that process started, months and months and months before that, before the deadline.
Okay, so the major pitfall, I suppose, you're saying is start early to allow yourself time. I mean, did they set up project groups to go through the various aspects? I mean, but
you can have projects. You can have as many project groups as you want until you're blue in the face. But if legal says we'll get back to you in a month, then that's a month when nothing happens, and then that bit gets done, and then IT security, then maybe they need another month to go through everything, and it's back and forth, and then there's it really takes a long time, and then there's holidays, and then there's things, and such and such can't be there, and then they leave, and then it is underestimated how long these kind of things can take. Actually, if you're working for a company that's very bureaucratic, it can really take a very long time. Having project teams always helps, but honestly, give yourself the time, because before you know it, it'll be the deadline gets there real quick. That was the main thing for me.
Okay. And so I forgot to ask you up front, which was very remiss of me. How big is your team managing all this?
Oh, we're actually a very small team of 4.
Okay,
just very small. Yeah, just 4 in total.
All based in Houston, or are they based around the world?
Around the world, yes. So we have members in Europe, in Asia, and in North America.
Okay. So again, a lot of work going on across the time zones together to put through these changes.
Yes.
Tell me, Sunn, if you had your time again, I appreciate you weren't there at the beginning, but looking at it now, looking back, would you have done anything different? What would you have done different?
Actually, no, I don't think. I think I came in at the right time, and I think doing the slow approach is the better approach. I feel you really need to really understand the company, the culture, what people really need and want, before being able to implement or make any big changes. I think it's good to start small. First, starting with policies, looking at each policy, and then slowly building up from that. Also, I think we've been in a very unprecedented time with the pandemic, and it's put a real, I don't know, I think it's affected the mobility industry a lot more than anticipated. So making those changes in a pandemic world, I want to make sure that whatever changes we make now make sense post-pandemic, whenever that may be. I'm not sure if we're post-pandemic yet. So I've been moving very slowly and cautiously, taking lots of advice from our vendors and also talking to the business. What does the business need? And so, yeah, so I'd say moving at a snail's pace, and I think at the right pace. So to answer the original question, no, I don't think I would have done anything different.
Okay, and let's just bring on Mena's comments, because I think Mena did come up with a comment. Let's just pull that up. And I think there, with Mena, the comment was about COVID, pre and post COVID. So I just want to pull that comment up.
Yes.
Okay, and tell us, I mean, Cyril, from your point of view, here we go. She said mobility before COVID versus mobility post-COVID. And then she also said, I believe you have to prepare a checklist before launching the processes with due dates and clear written responsibilities. Actually, let's look at that one for this last couple of minutes. I think that's tying in. But Sunn Sunn, from your point of view, do you think that obviously makes sense to have a checklist before even launching with due dates and clear written responsibilities? I mean, I think that must be a given, surely.
Yeah, that goes without saying. That would apply to any project that we would embark on. But I think you do need an overall game plan, a roadmap. What is it? What is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Where do you want to go to, and how are you going to get there? And within that process, you would have lots of checklists and identify who your stakeholders are. It's a whole project plan.
Okay, so maybe sort of leave the last word to you, Cyril, and then we're going to sort of bring back Pat and Julia onto the show. Again, a pearl of wisdom, someone going through this process, you've lived through it. What would be your pearl of wisdom to people going through the same process themselves?
I think knowing what your end goal is going to be, it's an incredibly complex process, right? And at the end of the day, if you have at least a vague idea of what your end goal is going to be, and I can only speak from specifically the assignment management software system, I can't speak for any of the other types of services that other vendors provide. But as long as you have an end goal and you can work your way towards that, then that's really the main thing. But kind of again going back on what I said before, it really is starting on time, and Mena's comment on having checklists and making sure, but really sticking to them as well. It's really getting your priorities right. Because it's very, very easy to get bogged down into nitty-gritty that isn't actually quite important, or isn't as important as you think it is. But it's really making sure that you've got the overall plan ahead and making sure those checklists. And I know they're a given, but they're not always done. I can, from experience, they're not always stuck to. Often it all goes completely off-piste. So it's very, very important to have a clear plan, and like I said before, give yourself enough time to get through it, because again, a company like the spinning off company, they will have to do that not only with us, EC International, or whatever other vendor, but they'll have to do it with many other ones. And Sunn Sunn's predecessor had her own global mobility job to then, she still had to manage expats as well. So this is all on top.
Yeah, you've got your day job as well.
Correct.
We're out of time, so I'm going to be bringing on Pat and Julia and Tally, and the team is here. And that all that really remains is to thank the audience for being with us. Thank our guests for a really insightful discussion. Thank you to Sunn Sunn. Thank you to Cyril for all your words of wisdom. For Pat, as ever, for your tax advice. Julia, for your immigration advice. And everybody in the industry now wishes you well. And I'm sure you'll be better in 24 hours or so. So we wish you all well. Happy Thanksgiving to those celebrating, and enjoy the football to those watching. Thank you, everybody. We will be back next week with a fascinating edition with not one, not two, but three change makers talking about their passion for change in our industry. So next week's edition is going to be all about passion. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Oh, Cyril and Sunn Sunn, that was so interesting. It was so interesting.